What do you think about using proxy miniatures in games? Josh?
I think it's a great way to get a unique army.
Yes. Well, let's take a look at yours here. We have a Mordian army that is actually from how many different companies?
Off the top of my head, I think there's at least 4 different ones here.
So there's a good discussion to be had about using proxies. So obviously, like at official Games Workshop events, they don't want you to use them, and you can understand why. And then you go to unofficial, like 40K, Age of Sigmar, Warhammer Fantasy events, and then there's going to be the discussion about whether the tournament organizers should or should not allow for proxies in those. You know, let's do a rapid fire question. Should they be allowed? If it's like a 40K event, should proxy models be allowed?
I think, like as a blanket thing, yes, with certain limitations on it.
What are the limitations?
So I think one of the things is it should be clear, especially if you're playing in a tournament or in any kind of an event, I guess, where it's competitive, what things are.
Yes.
So if you're going to proxy something, and it's not really obvious what it's supposed to represent, that can kind of, I think, throw off your opponent. So there's a lot more discussion to be had there. But I think if things are clear what they're meant to be, then yeah, no, absolutely. That's something that should be allowed.
And then it gets into the discussion things about like 3D printing and different methods that we have our proxy miniatures as well as to what should and should not be allowed. And it might just be, so some people it's just a silly discussion. It's like we should be able to do whatever we want because as long as I spend the time and the money doing it, then it should be allowed. But you do understand that that conversation has to happen because the companies want to make money because they want to be able to continue to exist.
Well, yeah, I think it's important to support the creators of the stuff that you're a fan of.
Yeah.
But also, you know, if that company is not providing something that you want to have in your army for whatever reason, then yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with taking a look at other companies. And there's a lot of people making wonderful miniatures out there. So
that is true. That is true. Now, I do think, though, that a lot of people will choose proxies because they're cheaper, especially if they're 3D printed. And so there's the discussion that maybe they're not just looking for something unique, they're just looking to save money as well. And I think that that's a, you know, it's an interesting discussion because on the one end, there's a discussion about IP, copyright, trademark. Mm-hmm. Like if somebody were to 3D print a Space Marine and it looks identical in every way to a Space Marine, is that morally, ethically okay? And obviously you couldn't stop them from doing it, but that's the problem, right? Like, and somebody sold that STL, let's say, and said, I'm going to spend my time in sculpting the identical Space Marine. They didn't just steal the copy, they actually sculpted it themselves. And I'm going to sell that STL so people can make their own Space Marines super cheap. And that's a harder discussion to have because it opens up the door to other countries that have more lenient laws towards copyright to be able to just flood the market with the cheaper alternatives for that as well. And some people might just kind of look at a company like Games Workshop or other big companies and almost dehumanize them and saying, well, whatever.
It can be easy to kind of go, well, there's some giant, you know,
conglomerate
corporation and whatever.
Right.
I think, yeah, that could be far too easy for people to do. And I understand the mindset of, yeah, wanting to be kind of cost effective. And it's tough because, I mean, I can speak to the reasons that I've picked different miniatures from different companies and what I like about them.
And we will in a second.
Yeah.
We definitely will talk about that and where these miniatures are from. So hang tight for that. But no, you're right. It's hard because we all want to play. We all have limited budgets. And so that kind of plays into all of it. And then there's the question of, like, there's morals, there's ethics, there's legalities, and those aren't always the same thing.
No.
So it can be illegal to do something, but morally okay. And it could be legal to do something and maybe immoral to do so. And I'm not even going to place a judgment on anybody watching this video for what you do. And I hope that it doesn't come across that way, that I'm saying do or do not do any of these things. I'm just saying that I understand why it is such a touchy conversation. Now, having said that, let's actually have some fun and talk about what you love about this army and where all the different models are from. Now, I will point out, first off, that we have a narrative campaign coming up soon, The Last 100, Season 2, that will feature this army plus some Death Watch. And like Season 1, if you're not familiar, it's a meat grinder. So essentially, Josh starts off with just these models, and whenever one of them dies, they stay dead for the entire campaign. Now, with some exceptions, the leaders have to die more than once. the Death Watch as well. They gain battle scars instead. But for the majority of what you see here, when it dies, it stays dead. And we did this in Season 1, and people really enjoyed it. It was against demons. This time it will be against Tyranids. And it's just, can Josh escape the planet, this awful place that is currently being infested by Tyranids? And if you want to, you are able to name one of these guys and then watch your guy die.
Yeah.
And whenever they die, we mention who it is that died. So if you want to do that, I'll put a link below. You can pay for as little as just a Guardsman for $25, all the way up to paying for more for the special characters and the Rough Riders. We've already got tons of them already taken, like the Platoon Commander, and all the characters actually have been taken. All the Death Watch have been taken. Some of the Rough Riders and the Scions. All the Sergeants are gone. But there's still plenty of conscripts and guardsmen that you can get. And you can also get it for free. So whatever the price would be, if you put that in your shopping cart and then actually add an equivalent number of products from the Forge, we'll actually discount it for free. So essentially, if it's $25, you can pay $25, or you can buy $25 worth of stuff. So dice, magnets, movement trays, miniatures from one-page rules and Titan Forge, terrain, whatever you want.
There's a lot of cool stuff there, and I think that was the original intent. But there seems to be a lot of people that are going, I don't want anything right now. So
and that's fine.
You know,
if you just want to pay it just to help support the campaign, then that's great too. So let's walk through, and this is actually exactly 100 guys, because obviously we count the heavy weapon teams as 2. So this is the last 100 of season number 2. So let's walk through the different models and where they are from. Let's start with your characters.
Okay, so starting off with the characters. Up front there, the only one that is Games Workshop is my Commissar. That is probably my favorite sculpt of all time. I think it's just super characterful. So that's an old, like he's metal. So yeah, I had been...
It fits the theme of the army.
It does
old
fit the theme
and
of the army.
outdated, right? Because this used to be, the Mordians used to be supported.
The Mordians were something you could buy back in the day.
Yeah, exactly.
From Games Workshop, but no longer. So yeah, and I think that's the only pewter mini that I have in there. So beyond that, the Platoon Command and the Priest, they are both from Victoria Miniatures.
That's an Australian company.
It is an Australian
Down
company.
under.
Make lots of different cool guard regiments, stuff that you can use for 40K.
Now, I believe that Victoria Miniatures are all of your regular dues except for the special weapons.
Except for the special weapons, and then also this fellow right here, that's Anvil Industry. So all my plasma gunners and that one Commissar are all Anvil, because they have a really cool system where you can mix and match a bunch of different torsos, heads, and other stuff to create these unique looking regiments of sci-fi type soldiers. But then everything else is Victoria Miniatures.
For the regular squads.
For the regular squads, correct, yeah.
Any other Victoria Miniatures besides the regular squads?
No. And then the only thing to make note is that obviously the heavy weapons, there's a little bit of mix of Games Workshop plastic in there, along with some of the bits from Victoria Miniatures. So the heavy weapons and then parts of the bodies are Games Workshop.
And Victoria Miniatures has a huge selection of Imperial Guard proxies of all sorts of regiments. And, they have the female variants as well. So they've been doing that for a long time.
Right, because you'll see some of the females are mixed in. So one of the sergeants, and then some of the troopers too. You got to squint a little bit to be able to tell. But once you know what to look for, they're obviously female.
Hey, if you're wearing army fatigues...
Everybody can die for the Emperor.
Exactly. So it's hard to tell the difference anyways. What about our ogres?
So the Bulgrins themselves, that's just straight up Games Workshop stuff. Because I think they make the coolest looking ogres right now.
And then we go over here we got conscripts.
So the conscripts, that's Wargames Atlantic. So that's a small portion of them. That is their, I believe the models are the cannon fodder.
Such a wonderful thought.
It's
as
fantastic.
if these guys weren't cannon fodder enough. Now you've got to actually have
the true cannon
the
fodder.
true cannon fodder. That's like the lowest of lows.
So with those, that's a kit that comes with a couple different head options, comes with a bunch of different weapon options. But I chose to have them painted up in the orange jumpsuits instead of kind of fatigues to make them look like regular army.
Came right out of jail, handed a rifle that maybe has ammunition.
Yeah, they were voluntold to be here.
And then just like kicked into a transport and driven to the front lines.
Pretty much. And that one is, because I was looking for a whole ton of them, so I think I got a grand total of 90 of them from Wargames Atlantic, because they were a great price. And they're a good little hard plastic kit.
Well, and it makes sense they're orange too, and nice and bright, because then they draw the attention of the firepower rather than the slightly more valuable regular guardsmen.
Exactly.
That'll cost a bit more to replace their gear.
But there's no confusion in the ranks of who's who, so that's super duper important.
What about the rest?
So the rest of this is Wargames Atlantic as well.
For the Rough Riders?
For the Rough Riders in the back there, that's their grognards. So they have regular troopers on foot that have the same style as well, but I thought this would be... I wanted my Rough Riders to be somewhat distinct looking from the rest of the army, but still kind of fit the same vibe. So this kind of weird futuristic Napoleonic look just kind of did it for me. And then up front, my Stormtroopers that I've had for quite some time now, that's also Wargames Atlantic. So that is the Eisenkern line. And they have some Games Workshop weapons on them because it just fits the scale. But otherwise, yeah, it's Wargames Atlantic hard plastic.
I'll put links below to all these companies. We got Wargames Atlantic, Games Workshop, obviously, Anvil Industries, and Victoria Miniatures. Yeah. And that's everything, right?
That's everything, and I'm really going to kick myself if I'm missing anything, and I don't believe I am right now, though.
Well, if you are, we'll update the description to be like, oh, and this was that.
I'll have a word with the commissars about it, I'm sure.
Exactly. Awesome.